Thanks so much for joining. Appreciate it.
Oh no, I'm happy to do it. Always thrilled to be able to talk about the movie, and we're still in like Q&A mode, so it's good timing. We're like been talking a lot and thinking a lot about the film in the last few weeks.
Sure. That's great. That's fantastic. No, it's a lovely old film. I First of all, thank you for providing with the screener link, and I honestly I saw the trailer whenever it came out, I think 2 months ago, and I was intrigued, just because it's just one of those things before the iPhone, and being in Ontario, Canada as well, and my brother-in-law used to work for BlackBerry, and so
Oh, amazing.
you know,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's like close to your heart.
that plus I think the bigger thing for me was when I was watching the film, there was all this little nostalgia that was tossed in, like one of my favorite scenes. I mean, you probably think it's one of those things that has nothing to do with the film, but to me it did, when they share good news and bad news. The bad news
Oh, the
being a
good. This is the good. Yeah, we have some good news and bad news.
yeah,
That's
and the
very
good
funny.
news.
Is that it's like, I guess, yeah, that is a bit unique to like it's slightly regional or something.
No, it was funny in a sense that it was real because, you know, because I remember, like, being a big Spielberg fan. That's what got into me into films. And then in late 90s, internet booming, I was part of that whole website and all that stuff, revolution and stuff. And so I related to that a lot, like where movies were everything, like, for people.
Right, they
And
were like the cultural touchdown
that
for,
was it. That
yeah.
was it. Like, it's like, okay, let's. And then I was also, for a year, I was part of a company during the IT boom where we had that kind of culture, where we had foosball table, pool table, there
Uh,
was any possible thing you can imagine you can do. So I related to that quite a bit, and I loved a little bit of anecdotes, a little bit of nostalgia tossed in there, and it was more than that, it was just the characters were done so well, and it was such a tightly knit film that you just could not even, say, I'll watch half tonight and I'll watch half tomorrow. You had to experience it in one sitting. So
oh,
well
that's
done.
fun. Well, don't tell that to
Yeah.
CBC, who are going to have the miniseries version of it in the fall.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Like
just going.
they're splicing it, or?
It's going to be basically just three broken into three parts, which is interesting. I mean, there's some stuff. It's almost like a director's cut in that there's stuff that's in the miniseries that isn't in
Okay, so there is
the
some extra
feature.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah, there's like a little bit, sort of, especially at the heads and tails of each section. Um, so it plays. It's interesting. I mean, I just saw the cut the other day, and it kind of has a neat flow to it. It's different than the movie, but it still kind of works. Mhm.
Yeah, no, as long as it can work. I mean, series are, good too because it gives you a little bit more latitude in terms of character development and all that. And I think
Mhm.
the type of film it is, if it had come out even that it has nothing to do with the film, it's just the world we live in. If it had even come out like 10, 15 years ago, it would have been one of those films that does relatively well at the box office.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but I
We're in a
we live
slightly different time.
Yeah, where everything has
Yeah.
changed, and you have to kind of take that the
Yeah.
route of web series and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing the web series whenever it's launched, just to get a
Oh, it'll be like a TV, like TV miniseries,
TV
I think.
series is what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
meant. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I
Yeah.
When I say web series, I think about Netflix, right? So
Well, that's, yeah. It's not even a dirty word anymore.
yeah.
It's just
So
it's just the reality.
no, for sure, man. Tell me before we get talk about BlackBerry. How did you get into being a cinematographer, a DP in the world of, media and films?
I will start my recording in that case. Hold on.
Sure.
Just because I might sound very off mic if I'm sitting here. Hold on one sec. Voicemail. Okay. So, and that's in frame. Slightly. Let's see. Put it right there.
Yeah, that's
There we
okay.
go.
That's good. That's
Great.
good.
How did I get started? I've always been one of these people that does a lot of different things. I haven't done exclusively cinematography, and I still don't. I've always been sort of jumping around doing different roles. So I've done
Sure.
quite a bit of directing, especially music videos, and um, a couple doc sort of. 3 years ago, I did a doc series for Netflix called "This Is Pop," all about pop music, and a lot of
Mm,
things in with bands and in the realm of music, just because that's sort of how I got into it. But um, yeah, cinematography is just sort of a natural extension of that. I always like being behind the camera and holding the camera, and the fun of grabbing a movie camera and then heading out into the to make stuff with your friends. And so that's sort of how I found it. I've been doing it forever too. I started in high school making little
mm,
videos with friends of mine, and so it's
sure.
something that like I've always loved.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And which, I mean, the fact that you mentioned that you do cinematography, directing, I'm assuming you've done editing as well. Um, there has to be one thing that you are more keen on doing than the rest of them.
I mean, I know there's supposed to be, but but I really don't think there is. I really do. For me, it's so much more about the project. You know, if it's
Mm,
I will do just about anything that I think I can do a good job on if the project is really great. So I will say I stopped. I was doing quite a bit of editing, and I edited a few feature docs. And at
mm,
a certain point, I stopped doing that because it was just kind of
too much.
a lot of sitting by myself in a dark room in front of a
Yeah.
screen, and I think that months and months of that back to back start to wear on me. But you know, I still love editing, and I think in some ways I'm probably better at editing than I am at cinematography. But it's just I don't know if I can take it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does require a lot of focus, a lot of time, and a lot of solitude time. Like, you're not being on the set as much as, rough days you may have, you're at least interacting with a group of people, and you can bounce off your energy, whichever it is, back and forth. But when you're in the editing room, it's just you and the screen and the characters who are in there, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's it's funny. Like I think most aspects of filmmaking are in some ways in conversation with the film itself. So that
Mm,
there's always a give and take where you're contributing to the film, and the film kind of tells you what's working and what isn't. And but with editing, there's this weird thing where you're so much more directly in the footage, because it already exists and the characters
yeah.
already exist and the scenes already exist. And the last film I edited was about somebody who was an artist at the end of his life, and he was dying. So through the
Mm,
process of editing the film, and he actually died while we were cutting and while we were still shooting. And I think it just took so much out of me, because it was like you're spending months and months in these really difficult moments, and something about that, it was like, people who live things only have to live them once, but when you're editing, you live things until the film is done. And I
yeah.
spent about 6 months working on that film, and that was the last one. After that, I said, I think I need to take a break from this. It was really, I mean, that's one really great thing about cinematography, is in some ways you get to focus really intensely on the shooting and that shorter period of time where you're on set, which you don't have the luxury of doing if you're a director or an
Yeah.
editor. The time is more stretched. Um, I mean, there's obviously a tremendous amount of prep, but really the prep is prep for that very condensed period of time.
Yeah, no, editing is incredible piece of um work, because it lets you create. Even, the film is written in three stages, right? The script, production and post-production, and it just lets you really create, but at the same time, yeah, it takes such a toll on you. I know that, you know, I had two features that I ended up feature documentaries, narrative docs that I ended up that I was directing, and COVID happened,
Mm.
and I took it upon myself just to start putting rough cut for both of them. These were both heavy human rights, you know, completely non-positive stories, and and then I obviously ended up hiring an editor just to, you know, finalize the film and complete it. But those 2 years, because COVID happened, we had some delays and stuff, took such a toll on me that
Yeah.
as much as I love editing, and I'm in that same headspace as you are right now, is that not that I don't want to ever edit again. I just don't know if I can do it right now if a project came.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does it takes out so much on you. It really
Yeah,
does.
it's you're emotionally entwined with the footage in a way that I don't think any other role, you know, even a director has a
Yeah.
slightly broader perspective in some ways.
Yeah.
Like if you're not spending so much time with the footage and going through the footage, and also the other thing that I realized about editing is it doesn't like leave you. You know, you wear these grooves of trying to solve story problems so deep that you go to bed and you're dreaming
Oh,
all night.
yeah.
These same editing problems are like they don't they don't go away. Um, and so, you know, in some ways, any, you know, that still happens to me. I'll be, you know, on
Yeah.
the set of BlackBerry, I was still having weird, you know, lighting issues. I couldn't solve dreams every single night. But the something about, yeah, the editing is requires so much of your brain for such an extended period of time that it really is an intense endeavor.
Yeah.
It's like, um, and I love it. I mean, for the same reason, I think it's incredibly powerful. Like the power of storytelling that you wield, you know, in an edit is much. It's more. I think, you know, editors have a much greater impact on the finished film than I ever could as a cinematographer, or, you know, any other role could. It's
Well,
like the yeah.
it's a collaborative effort, right? But one thing I really liked what you said, it's so true, whether it's an editor or a cinematographer or a director or set decorator, production designer. When you're working on the set or in the editing room, whatever your job may be, you know, you come across something that you have to solve, right? That's just the nature of filmmaking. And most of the time, if not all, you can't figure out that solution that you really want that makes everything work out. And then you go home, or you're taking a shower, or you're about to go to sleep, and that moment light bulb pops up. And that has happened to me so many times, that where you get all these best ideas when you're not actually working because your mind has taken break from it
Mm-hmm,
and you're
mm-hmm.
thinking about it. And it's so true. It happens to all of us, and it's just part of the process. You know, that tells you that how much involved we are in storytelling. That's all we're thinking about all the time.
I know. Well, it's an all encompassing. I mean, that's one of the great things about film is you can, you know, the more you, I think
Yeah.
that especially with this crew, the BlackBerry crew, we have this, you know, real belief that like every amount of effort that you put into the film is going to be rewarded back to you, like by improving the film and that and making it a little bit better. And we'll kill ourselves for that extra little, you know, 2% better on the scene. You know, if we can make the scene 2% better and it's going to take a day of our work, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Because I think those little tiny improvements add up. And that's something that I think a lot of, you know, filmmakers struggle with, or at least I see, you know, filmmakers work on things. And by the time they get to, you know, that last stretch, they're just exhausted. You know,
Yeah.
you get into the last couple weeks of editing, or maybe you need another 2 weeks of editing, but you're just spent, and you say, this is the film and it's done. And I think what they don't realize is probably that 2 weeks is all the difference. Like that little push at the end where you have nothing left and it's
Yeah.
the end of the day and everyone's exhausted and you just have 2 more shots to get and you do one take and it's not great, but everyone wants to go home. It's like, I think that's kind of where the films are made or lost is in that final little bit of energy and thought and care.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's also I have this theory. I talk about this all the time to a lot of people, is that when you see a film, any film, right, any genre, and it's going great, they review it that the first half was great, but the last half wasn't, or it was great until the last act, or the ending kind of got messed up. I genuinely believe, especially I don't because in production at least things are sort of, you're not really filming chronologically most of the time. So
Mhm.
it's hard to tell, but in post-production, you're more or less editing, chronologically after you have kind of cut down all the scenes. And that last stretch sometimes shows in the ending where the ending happened too quickly or too
Right.
abruptly. And there is no like back, like, well, how did we get here all of a sudden? Right? And that stuff happens, I think, in every part of the cinema in the world. And I've seen that where the ending kind of just pops out of nowhere. There's no explanation. I can't think of a film right now, but there are several that have had that happen. You notice it that just ended abruptly for whatever reason, whether
This
they're
this is a bad example because it's so meticulously planned. But we were just talking about how the Little
yeah,
Mermaid, the animated version,
yeah,
has an ending that it's just like happens very quickly and is done. But it's so
yeah,
funny when I mean that's a beloved animated film, so it's kind of a bad example of like, oh, ruined the movie. But it did for me. I rewatched it the first time a couple of years ago, and that's the thing that shocked me. I was like, it just completely rushes the ending. It's like
yeah.
very
No,
funny.
I know it happens in a lot of films, and yeah, it's just one of those things. But talking about BlackBerry, how did you get on board on the film? Like, did Matt know you, or were you
Yeah,
just
this movie was made by a group of friends and filmmakers. We've been working together since for now about since 2007 or so,
okay?
maybe
Sure.
2008. That's when I started making a web show with Matt and Jay McCarroll, who is the composer on this film and executive producer. And um, we started because we had been, they had started making this very silly web show, just the two of them in their apartment, and they needed somebody to come and basically hold the camera.
Mm,
And so that's kind of how our dynamic evolved, was making this silly web show. And then after that, we made the Dirties, and that went to Slam Dance, and it won Best Feature at Slam Dance, and then that kind of launched Matt into being able to make a second feature, Operation Avalanche. So, but all along, it's been the same basic small group of 5 or 6 people. We've kept the team really close together, and I think that part of that is that the movies that we make are really loose in their production, and so they inherently have a lot of trust. Also, Matt has always kind of acted in his own stuff and been on camera as well, so you kind of need to have a team around you that you trust, or because even on BlackBerry it wasn't it wasn't possible to review every take, and it wasn't possible to like go back and do playback on everything. We like to shoot these long kind of documentary style scenes without cutting. It's not standard coverage necessarily. So yeah, it feels like we've been working together so long that it's like a given at this point that that's just sort of how movies are made. I mean, we all go off and work on other projects, and it's always funny to realize that, oh no, in the real film world, like people come together for one project and then part ways. It's not
yeah,
like these
yeah.
like deeply worn relationships and friendships that you can just step into at any time and it's easy.
I wonder how much of that is in BlackBerry, your friendship and your
Oh,
connection.
a huge part of it. I mean,
Yeah,
Matt Matt Miller and Matt Johnson. There's quite a few Matts in this core group, so just if it's in case it's not confusing enough. They wrote the script, and I think that what really cracked the script for them was when they realized, oh, we can make this about filmmaking in our lives and our experiences, because I think, you know, the feeling of going from just a small group of friends working on something to suddenly having all these resources, and things scaling up quickly, and the kind of challenge that poses to friendships, is something that, you know, we've all gone through. I think, you know, we've had to navigate what it means to suddenly find success, and I think that, you know, or at least whatever modest success Canadian film filmmakers can achieve, but that was what kind of gave them, I think, the fuel to realize that they could be the people to tell this story. You know, this was something that, you know, we weren't a part of. We weren't like you. We didn't work at a tech startup in the 90s. We were, you know, still learning how to, you know, make films, and we're very separate from that tech boom when it happened. So the turning it into a film about friendships, I think, gave everybody an access point to understand that, you know, it was something that we could all dig into and have some relationship with.
Yeah. No, it's quite evident, and you know, there are these little things in the film that I really like. I don't think we ever come to know the names of those characters. Excuse me. The staff that was working with before BlackBerry became BlackBerry, like the group of guys, and even when BlackBerry was before iPhone, like all those individuals that you'll see on camera here and there, and you don't even hear them, but there's this certain expectation that I got, that I need to see what they're up to, even if they are just, you know, tightening the screw or whatever they are doing. It's just built in so nicely. Like I thought that was the heart and soul of the film as well. It's just those little things that make a huge difference, the little details.
Well, it's part of that, I think, is we wanted, you know, I think we knew that if we didn't make the environments feel alive, then we were going to fail, because we're not obsessive about how exactly. I mean, there were certain points in the film where we wanted them to feel, you know, very controlled, and where we wanted to have control over how the shots were going to play, how the scene was going to play out, and that kind of thing. But we're not freaks about, we're drawn to visual storytelling that comes out of the real world. So, you know, the behavior of the camera person discovering something, you know, finding something in the frame that's interesting. Oh, what's that person doing? That's interesting. And sort of finding that action and letting the camera be the eyes of the audience. You know, that's the sort of storytelling tools that we get excited about. So I think that the idea of making these environments feel alive, and also, you know, dressing them not to the shot but to the scene. So even the production design was done in a way where these rooms were just basically decked so that we could go into them and shoot in any direction, and if someone walked over by the window, or, you know, something was happening over here that we didn't plan on shooting but we decided last minute, or thought was interesting, or if I just pan over there, you know, as part of the coverage, that it was all usable. So that's something that I think is maybe a little bit unique, and you don't see a ton of in, you know, more of a traditional fiction filmmaking. It's not, you know, I think it's a powerful tool, especially as we all get more comfortable with handheld camera, and we're watching hours of amateur video shot on iPhones every day. You know, the social media just bombards us with that, the language of real documentary, or like you know, home video, I suppose. I think those tools and the language of home video and a camera being excited, what it feels like to be, seeing things through a camera that's being held by somebody that's excited versus somebody that's has malicious intent versus somebody that like, is being sneaky, like, or is catching something you're not supposed to see. We all are ingesting and developing a like an understanding of what that looks like and feels like. So we know if something's real. You could show a 14-year-old kid 2 videos and say which one is staged and which one's real, and they're going to be able to tell you. Whereas, that nuanced language is not necessarily always trickling up into cinema. We're still making cinema pure artifice. And I think that there's like much to be learned from the very scrappy homemade style films or even just video, home shot video, in terms of getting into the psychology of the viewer and manipulating emotion and that kind of thing.
Right. And your when you how many days of the production was roughly? Was it 2-3 months?
It was about 2 months. It was 35 shoot days.
And where did you
including
guys shoot
reshoots.
mostly?
We were almost entirely in Hamilton. We took over an old steel mill that was basically an abandoned building. At and there were huge empty spaces. And then what that allowed us to do was the production design team could be working on, the office set upstairs while we're shooting the engineering stuff downstairs and that kind of thing. We knew that our big challenge was going to be these big production pieces and trying to recreate engineering floors and that kind of thing. So the only way to really do it efficiently was to own the space and let them really, plug away at it all in one building, basically. And if we were to do the same thing in a studio, it would be completely unaffordable. I mean, so we had to run power in, and it was, there were raccoons living in the ceiling and that kind of thing. So it was there no air conditioning, no airflow. The actors were always cooking. They felt terrible.
Yeah. And were there any references that you took, not just you, maybe production designer that you were aware of, or even Matt, like any of the archival photos of BlackBerry? Or
well, weirdly, I mean, these are not things that there's normally great documentation of. Like there'll be, a magazine would come in and do a spread with Jim and Mike, but they wouldn't show the nitty gritty of the messy office and how people worked. So early on in the research phase of writing, Matt made contact with an engineer that worked there, sort of from the beginning all the way to the end. And he was nice enough to basically just, he luckily is just a guy who always was carrying around a digital camera, and he had a huge archive of photos of just offices mostly, or like, oh, here's the engineering bay, here's, this was lunch on Tuesday, like really banal stuff. And that the photos that I took, he shared in a organized document, and it kind of became our Bible for the entire look and feel of the shoot. And in fact, I got a lot of the ideas for lighting the film from that. I mean, not from his photos, because they were usually just like flash photography on a little camera, but the spaces would have were all lit with like work, like sort of fluorescent work lights. And they would sometimes be mixing color temperatures, so there'd be like one blue one warm one. Like they weren't thinking about the quality of the light, they were just trying to make it bright so they could at their workstation. And it gave us the idea to light everything as much as we could with just the available lighting in the space. So like all the engineering bays, there's very little additional lighting. There'd be, you know, we'd do like one big window source or something, but most of the lighting is motivated by practicals in the space. Mhm.
Right. Any challenges that you recall from as a cinematographer standpoint, or even on the set by everybody else that you guys faced filming a scene?
I mean, yeah, the puzzle. I think the big puzzle for us was like this was a big um, departure for us in terms of the scale. You know, we don't
Mhm.
normally we're Nat's previous films have been him and then a couple other friends acting opposite him. We've never had to work with actors before. We've never had to, you know, work with a crew larger than a dozen people. You know, we've kept it incredibly small, and so scaling up comes with its own set of challenges. You suddenly are beholden to, you know, the you know timelines that are extremely condensed, to working with larger teams, to the infrastructure of a set. All of that
Yeah.
is like, you know, we you know, I think there's like huge advantages to working with smaller crews, but of course we were never going to be able to pull this movie off
Yeah.
without a larger crew. I mean, it's still, I'm sure by Hollywood standards, it was still
Much
tiny. You
more.
know, we
How
keep
big was the crew?
maybe 50 people on set, and then, you know,
Yeah.
expanded out into the base camp, whatever. Maybe double that when including all the infrastructure. But yeah, it was like you know, most people would have, who work on larger sets, would have looked at it and thought it was a very small crew, but it felt gigantic to us considering where we came
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
Mhm.
Um, you know, in terms of you yourself being on a film like that, right? Like you've done stuff in the past, and yes, you have shifted from a smaller crew to a bigger crew. Was that ever, not in a negative way, but I think we all get intimidated by certain things, no matter where we are in our career. Was that ever intimidating? And also working with like, actors um who played some of the lead characters.
Yeah, he was hugely intimidating. You know, where it's like, I think that everybody, or at least most people who are good at what they do in film, suffer from some amount of imposter syndrome, where they feel like they're not, you know, uh, it's like, you know, it was both, I would say it was both intimidating and motivating, because there was a real sense that we knew that if we could pull this off, that we could really make something special. And in a way, knowing that the things that we don't know could be helpful, could actually make this not like every other movie. And I think there's a thing that sometimes Canada doesn't do very well, which is understanding that a unique voice, and not trying to make something look like everything else, and the fact that it doesn't follow the mold of everything else that's being made out there.
Yeah,
That a little bit of naivete is sometimes an incredibly powerful tool for original stories. And it's something we're aware of, but it also means that, you know, there's no template. So we really felt like we were going into this, you know, with, you know, uh, I think it was, yeah, it was a it was a two-sided feeling. When on one hand we felt like, you know, intimidated by the scale of the film and the fact that there were actors in it that had worked on much larger
yeah,
productions with much more professional and experienced crews. But on the other hand, I think we were like, yeah, but that's probably going to be a good thing. The fact that we don't know anything is probably a good thing. And I think that comes from the other stuff we've made, where we realized that one of our greatest assets as a team is that we're not trying to make something that looks like every other movie out there, and that probably, even if we tried, we couldn't. So we may as well lean into what we're good at and try to use as much of that to tell the story as possible. Like for me, you know, the fact that I lean towards a more documentary style of shooting scenes and I much more observational approach. You know, I think that there's like most people would say, oh, well, then that you know, I should probably only shoot documentaries, right? Like, you know, that's what I'm good at. I should probably only do that. But fiction film is incredibly fluid, like, and especially at scale, because resources can allow you to take something that you would normally see as a hindrance and in fact turn it into like what could be a unique voice. So that's something that is good, you know, for people starting out or young filmmakers or people who are just, you know, starting out in the industry, for them to know is that like probably the things that you think would be are holding you back might be the ticket to your unique voice and your success. You know, the those what you don't know is as important as what you do know.
Right. That is so true, man. It's and then you're spot on about the whole Canada thing, and I do think that, you know, we, aside from, I mean, I don't want to say certain things because your film is funded by some of these organizations, but part of the problem is also that we always talk about, uh, you know, giving new artists chances and all that. And granted, I mean, not everybody can be given chances because there is, you know, a pool and whatnot. But at the end of the day, from what I see and from the people that I know, um, probably with the exception of you guys now that I know of, most of the time that projects that get the green light are by people who are extremely, extremely established. Like they've already sort of have a career and whatnot. And that new voice kind of, and then you see stuff on different channels and different streaming platforms in Canada. To me, they all look, we take this value of, you know, it has to be Canadian, right? Which is great. But then you are so stuck in this box of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
that then you have to come up with, and there's a lot of people that do come up with only stories that are with the realm of Canada, which is
Yeah.
fine, but it's not gonna get you to the outside markets that necessarily, unless it's more of a human story than a Canadian story.
Well, it's also like, what is it? What, you know, what is it to be a Canadian story if other than a story told by a Canadian? I mean, that's I don't that the it's such a vague and broad
It is.
definition,
Yeah.
and like, you know, my experience of Canada is an incredibly wide, diverse set of stories from told by people who have come from all over the world and, you know, have unique experiences from other countries, other cultures, other places, and to bring and share. And like, what there's not, that's an incredibly Canadian thing too. So I don't, the definite, you know, it's a extremely problematic line
It is.
item in the funding bodies of these must be Canadian stories, because I don't really know what that is. I mean, yeah, sure. If I don't, and I also don't really think that what's going to suddenly happen if you take that out is that everyone's going to be making movies set in New York and LA, you know, and shot in New York and LA, because that's just way too expensive. You're going to end up with Canadian stories no matter what. It's like,
Exactly. And but at the same time, I also think, I don't know if you remember that movie Sweet Hereafter, but by Adam McGowan,
mhm.
which was nominated for an Oscar. This was like what, 15 years ago or so, maybe even longer. And now the limit, when you're so right about, like, people are not going to go to New York and start shooting unless they have a budget, but to be able to get into the outside world, to the international market, I genuinely believe we have to tear this thing down about Canadian stories, because
Mhm.
otherwise we're not expanding ourselves to outside world. I know we don't want to be like Hollywood, I get it, but at the same time there must be some sort of a happy medium place where we can tell these stories. And when you put people in a box, in a constrained box, then they're going to try to get outside that box. So when there's freedom, then they'll probably still be in that box because they know they can, and they'll make that choice on themselves, right? So
Yeah, it's hard enough to make a good movie. My God, it's like,
you know,
you know,
I know.
making a movie like that does not suck is already so difficult and requires so much energy and time and thought and care by such a large group of people, that the more arbitrary parameters you put um, on the film, and it's not just the funding, but I mean that can come from anywhere. You know,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
production companies and um, you know, distributors and broadcasters that all do this, where it's just like, oh well, but you know, even the what's the seemingly smallest roadblocks in the way can become a huge hindrance to that finished product being great. And I think that, you know, you're going to have the same success failure rate on people left to their own devices as you are on
Yeah.
really specific parameters put on a project. Like you know, I've worked on projects where the broadcaster notes come in and they're, you know, trying to turn the thing into something that it's not, and it ends up just kind of dissolving the essence of whatever it could have been in the first place. I think that there's like a, you know,
No, I get it, man.
it's better to foster that. I would say that that only works though if we can foster a creative environment where people are don't feel like they have to only praise. Is the other thing. Like this is the other the flip side of the Canadian coin is like we're really, you know, too nice to each other when it comes to making art. And and I shouldn't say that because it's not a matter of being nice or not nice. I think that we have a problem with criticism, and
Well,
we don't
yeah.
know how to critique each other in constructive ways, and so everyone just pats each other on the back and says, "Oh, I loved, you know, this. I love what a wonderful film. I loved it, really great," and doesn't know how to tell somebody that they thought the rough cut was bad. I won't name any names, but I just, you know, recently there was a project that I had seen an early cut of, and you know, I really thought that there was something there, but it needed a tremendous amount of work. And they had a feedback screening of Canadian industry professionals, and I was so excited because I was like, oh, finally, like I won't have to be the only one,
Hmm.
you know, giving really harsh notes. And the feedback screen, and after the feedback screen, I said, how did it go? How'd the feedback screen go? Like I was, you know, what do people think? And the answer, it was like universal praise, like everybody marking 10 out of 10 and on the sheet. It was like, oh, it's perfect. The film is, you know, it's 100% from the screening. And that's like, to me, that's it would only happen in Canada. Like, you know,
And
it's
it
like
it
because
it
I
is,
know, you know, I know the film is not that
yeah.
needed, you know, and probably the people there did too. It's just that we really have trouble giving constructive feedback and criticism in a way that we're afraid to say anything bad about something if it's Canadian.
Yeah, no, I agree with 100%. And also the fact that, it's hard enough to make a film that is great, but even if you make a great film in today's market, you probably won't even get noticed. Like it's just, it's
Right.
just one of those things. And and the whole thing about, I am, and I'm sure you are too. I am the type of person that I want to surround myself with people who will always criticize what I'm doing, not in a negative way, but in a way
Yeah.
to make, improve the work that I do. And I'm never, I learned my lesson a while ago, like about over a decade ago, with a film that I did, and I showed it to a bunch of people in Canada, not knowing that it's a Canadian thing or an American thing, and or whatever. And there was this all praise. I'm like, okay, great. And then I showed it to some of the Americans, it was completely opposite, and that taught me a lesson that,
Mhm.
you know, I think I know like maybe handful of Canadians who would be very upfront with me. But other than that, it's like you have to, if you want to make a great piece of art or film, you have to show it to people that you're afraid to show it to them. Like
Oh
you
my
have,
God. I went to go see Ruben Östlund talk about his new film. Um, and this is a thing that he does and when he's writing. So he did it with Force Majeure, and he did it with the film. Actually, I think he started it with Play was the first time he did this. But basically, as he's and Triangle of Sadness, same thing. And the move that he does is he'll pitch the film to anybody who will listen and tell them the whole plot in detail as he's writing the idea, and hundreds of times over the course of preparing for a film. So he did this in Berlin when we were premiering BlackBerry, and we went to get, I went with the BlackBerry team. We all went to go see it, and he basically stands up there and he explains everything that's going to happen in the movie, and then he says, "Okay, what do you think?" And he just opens it up for complete criticism. And if someone, obviously people were asking, well, what if, you know, don't you feel like you're getting like too much, like if you're getting too much feedback, you're watering down the idea?
yeah,
Or don't in some ways, don't you want to protect your thoughts on the matter so that you're not like your vision remains intact? And he said uh something that I really agree with, which is that if creative people being afraid of criticism is really one of two things. Either they think that they are some brilliant artist in conversation only with God, and that any human mortal who interferes with that relationship is going to water down or ruin the product, which is
yeah,
complete BS. Or they're afraid that they have a bad idea, and that if they say it out loud, then it's a bad idea, that someone's going to tell them it's a bad idea, and that's going to feel bad. And then they have to be confronted with all the problems in their idea, because inherently every story, especially in its infancy, is going to be full of
oh
errors and
yeah,
problems and things that you haven't thought about. And so, he really believes in this opening up of the creative process. So, people will be completely changing the film with one note. Force Majeure was going to be about a whole family, and it was going to follow, or no, a bunch of people, and it was going to follow each person's experience after the avalanche. And a friend of his said, no, 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 no. So the husband, there's going to be, and he said, well, there's this one thing, this husband, he runs away, and he said, that's the movie. Is that an avalanche happens and a husband doesn't stay with his family, instead runs away and leaves them. That's the whole movie, is that one story that you have in there. And he thought about it and he said, yeah, that's better. And he took it and was like, that, of course, he's right. And imagine, how much, and that's what's so great about the film, is this really kind of close dissection of that one person's experience and that one family and how it kind of is affected by the incident.
yeah,
So I really do believe in that, and we are, especially the team that made BlackBerry and all the stuff that we do, we're incredibly hard on each other creatively. I mean,
of
we're
course,
incredibly easy on each other as friends, and we try to be there for each other and are supportive as friends. But when it comes to the work, like, we're not precious. We are not afraid to tell somebody else. And it was, I think, jarring for some people coming on the set to see the composer going up to the director and saying, I think you need to, that there's a problem with the scene and you need to reach, or like, Matt coming over to the monitor after a thing and being like, was that scene good? And asking, me and Matt Miller and Adam Belanger, the production designer, who just happened to be at the monitor, and us being like, well, we should really start it this way. We should change this. Maybe we drop that line of dialogue. Like, there isn't anything that we can't say to each other. The same way that Matt could very frankly come up to me in the middle of it and being like, this sucks, this isn't working. He's not, there's no fear and we understand that that's really just part of the process. You get a much better film if you
yeah,
are able to pivot when something's not working. And most of the time, the thing that's stopping you from pivot is just fear. It's just, you're afraid that it's gonna you're going to insult somebody or hurt somebody's feelings, or like you're going to look bad, or if you're wrong, all of these things hold you back from making a better thing. So when you can find people who are not afraid to like tell you an idea is
Oh
bad,
yeah.
those people, you keep them really close, and they're like, that's a really valuable collaborator. Anyone can
Well,
tell you what's working about something, you know.
exactly, and it's kind of, I mean, this is not literally the interpretation of what you just said, but it's like keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer, right? Like even if,
I would say make your enemies your friends,
yeah,
because they're going
you
to give
know,
you better feedback.
exactly, because they are always going to tell you what, and they may not be right, right? That's the thing. They may not be right, but that's okay,
Yeah,
because as a creative storyteller, as a filmmaker, director, cinematographer, whatever that you do, you are going to learn something out of it that may
yeah,
be applied, and you're gonna grow as a human being by taking criticism that may hurt, right? But if you're looking at the big picture, which is the betterment of the film versus betterment of your feelings, then you're in the
and
wrong.
one is such a short term. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like, it's
it
very
doesn't
easy
last.
to say. It is
Yeah,
very, very hard to put into practice, to be able to just eat your ego and really, really, truly try to have no ego, because it just kryptonite to the creative process, especially in filmmaking, where it is so deeply collaborative, and the product morphs so extremely from script to production, then from production to the edit, and then even in sound design. Like, it's films are extremely malleable through the whole process. It's not like
mm,
pottery where it takes a form and then you're just sort of refining the form. It's
yeah,
like it can be completely reconstructed at any point. And so it's very subject to the winds of change, and can be blown off course quite easily. So being able to hear when you've taken a wrong turn from people that you trust, and for people not to be afraid to say it, is like
yeah,
extremely important. And it should be part of the process. I mean, they try to with feedback screenings and all that jazz. And I think in America, people are, like you said, are a little less afraid. Like, you can do a feedback screening. We had
yeah.
a feedback screening. I don't know. I assume I'm probably allowed to talk about this. I can't imagine why I wouldn't. But we had a feedback screening for BlackBerry early on, with a cut that I think we all knew needed a lot of work. Like, we really felt like the film was not yet in any kind of presentable shape. And
Hmm.
it was, Telefilm said it was the highest rated feedback screening that they'd ever had. Like, it had an incredibly high rating. And if anything, I think it kind of worried us, because we were like, what are we like, what are they seeing that we're not? Like, what on earth? It's like, this is it, but it's, of course, looking back, like, oh, that's very Canadian. I mean, it's like, it was just, our bar is so low, I guess, that even you know even now, I mean, I look at, the finished film, and I know that, it's got, what, a 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes or something, and
Yeah.
I know it's not I think it's a really, great film, and we're incredibly proud of what we made, but we know it has problems. We there were the things we couldn't fix about the movie, or we look back, we're like, oh, we could have done that better, we could have done that better. But it's okay to hold both those things, to be true, to
But
know that, okay, well, I think we made something good. Of course it's not perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. No film is perfect.
exactly, and I mean, you look at, you talk to Spielberg or Lucas or Coppola or Brian De Palma, all these great filmmakers, and they will always say that, I wish I had done something different on Jaws or Scarface or whatever that is.
Yeah,
But that's
yeah,
just, and that's fine, because you know what? At the end of the day, that will teach you something for the next project or the next project after that, and so on and so forth, and
yeah,
you grow as a person, and it teaches you that you are not going to make 100% perfect film. So stop worrying about it.
yeah.
It's
There,
not
I had
filmmaking.
a great teacher in film school named Lawrence Green, who was really passionately cared about uh, the projects the students were making. And I remember I heard this statistic where something like 98% of the people in film school do not continue on in film, like staggering statistic about how few
Yeah.
people actually make it and actually stay in the industry. And yet you look around and 90% of the people in your class are convinced that they this is for them and they have what it takes
Yeah.
and they're a genius. And I said, I remember I kind of went to him after class. I said, like, how on earth do you know the difference between, like, how do I know I'm not one of these deluded idiots that
Yeah.
like thinks I'm built for film and I have what it takes to work in the industry and work in film. And he said something that I often think about. And he said, well, there's no recipe at all. You know, some people, it's just life. It takes you here, it takes you there. But he said, of the people that are successful in film, I have noticed what they all have this one trait. And it's the ability to finish the film, finish the product. So see it through to completion, to see all the problems with it and not let that crush them. To recognize the problems and then go and make the next thing. And he said that he's like, it's not like that's a recipe for success in films, but he said everyone I know who's successful can do that. And when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that is kind of it. It's like
True.
it's that ability to make mistakes, understand their mistakes, try to improve them while you can, and the mistakes you can improve, you try to improve in the next project and move on to the next, and to carry the lessons of the previous one with you, and always be trying to do it a little better, a little better. So, you know, that's sort of, I think that's partially why the group of us that made BlackBerry are still working together and will continue to work together, is because we all share that feeling of like, you know, as long as we stick together, we know we're going to keep each other in check and always try to make whatever we're working on just that little bit better, one line, one scene, one shot at a time.
Yeah, no, I spot on about the whole, completing the film, because I have known quite a few people who spent 30, 40, 50 grand or whatever amount of dollar, and then halfway they just stopped. And even
Just, yeah.
for whatever reason, whether it was financial or insecurities or whatever, and even one of the courses that I took at Ryerson, it was like a final production course. We had like a group of 6 of people, and everybody had to do a different role on everybody else's film. So one time you'll be a boom operator, DP, assistant director, director, cinematographer. And that group of 6 of people, one of them became a real estate agent, and he was probably the most creative among all of us.
Yeah.
And one of them, I have no idea what he does. One of them works at a distribution. One of them does corporate videos, and the other one and me are the only ones that are still, trying to just keep going and making films. And it's right, it's so true. Like I'm willing to bet my entire production class was like maybe 98, 99% of the people have, it's not even film, like in other degrees, like you take these other degrees, you don't end up doing what you
Right.
study,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's true. It's probably not, it's not unique to film at all.
Yeah,
People, life takes you on different
it
paths.
does. It does. And that just
Um,
tells you that maybe it wasn't for you. You weren't into it as much as you thought
mhm.
you were. That's all it is.
Yeah, it helps to know that, like, I also think film is one of those things, and this probably goes for any of the arts, but like, it's too difficult to do to not really enjoy it. Like, if you're a
Yeah.
musician, I'm sure it's the same thing. It's not, it's like the work is hard, the hours are very long. So if you don't want them to be, like, if you're not happy to stay that extra hour just to get it done, then you can be miserable. And you see some people that ended up in working in film and are in it because the money is still good and they sort of haven't been able to find anything else. And just like, you know, some of the union gig workers that are miserable. And it's because it's not an easy, it's like an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah.
The hours are long, it's not consistent, you don't have regular work, like you can go through droughts where all of a sudden you're just not getting paid for long periods of time. Like, it's not financially stable at all, you can't count on it. Projects get canceled or postponed. It's like, if it really isn't like something you love doing, then and I think that's got to go for just about any
Yeah.
creative
Profession.
industry.
Yeah.
But it's if it is what you love to do, it's the best job in the world. Like there's no better job. It's challenging and creative and interesting, and it's possible to be paid well. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And so
No, I think it does. It just you have to just keep at it. And some people you get it rather quickly. Some people, you get it rather late. I was talking to Don Burgess, who's worked quite a bit with Zemeckis. He's a DP, and he's 66 years old, and the amount of child in him and his love for movies. I've talked to him like for 3 times on this podcast, and he just you can tell why he is great at what he does because he just loves movies and he just
yeah,
loves being on the set. And he's like, this I can't imagine doing anything else for as long as I live. And that's what you gotta have. You gotta have that drive of not thinking about that safety net and just keeping at it, and that's it.
yeah, it's true. I mean, yeah, it feels, the people that become great at their job, it's like you don't, the the 16-hour day is like you don't even blink. Of course, it's like if that's the time it takes, it's the time it takes, and it's the time flies by. Our biggest fear making this movie was that we were really going to screw it up badly and not be able to make the next one, because I turned multiple times to Matt Miller during production. I was like, man, wouldn't it be something if we just got to do this for the rest of our careers? Just got to work on, movies with a bit of resources and, tell a story that we were excited to tell. But I think that is kind of the high watermark for a lot of us. But in truth, like that could mean a lot of things too. It could be a documentary, or it could be, there's a lot of. It doesn't always have to be like a fiction film with stars in it. I think
Sure.
it's, like I said, doesn't, for me at least personally, the project, I don't care the scale of it or what genre or anything, as long as it's a great story and it's an exciting story to tell.
Yeah, no, if it makes you happy and that's what you gotta do, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, and then with it you're getting paid to do it, and that's it, then you're set. I mean,
There was
it's all
also, I mean, what you said made me think of something that my father is a printmaker. He's a visual artist, and it's all he's done his whole life is printmaking. And I think when I was in high school or something, I asked him like, how did you, most people probably told you that you can't make money as an artist or as a visual artist. What made you stick with it? And he said, you know what, you do what you love long enough, people will just start throwing money at you to do it.
it's so right. It's 100%. If you chase excellence, money will fall on your feet.
Yeah, it takes time. I mean, he was probably 40 years old before he really started making, we when I was quite young, we were strapped, but eventually, he did start making good money as an artist. But it wasn't until he was in his 40s and started doing these kind of bigger shows and things. He was really just living, day to day, scraping by. It was a little easier to do in the 70s and 80s, but
yeah. But you look at Ridley Scott, right? His film career started in his 40s. Before that, he was doing commercials, and look what he's done, like, Alien, Gladiator, Blade Runner, and so many other films that he's done. But yeah, no, listen, man, this has been great. I would love to keep talking. And thank you so much for joining. This has been a very fun conversation, insightful conversation. Before I let you go, anything planned for next project, or you guys are still trying to
we're going to turn that scrappy web show that I started making with Matt and Jay in their apartment. It became a television show on Vice, which has 2 seasons. In Canada, you can watch it on CBC Gem. It's called Nirvana the Band, the show, but it's a very loose comedy shot in the real world, and we are always trying to find excuses to go back and make more of that project, because it was a web show and then a TV show, and now we're going to go make a movie. So that's kind of the next thing for that team.
Fantastic.
But and then who knows after that? Maybe another
What is
big
it?
feature.
What is it called? The show?
Nirvana the band, the show.
Nirvana the band. The show.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Unrelated to the 90s grunge band.
No, I was gonna say it's probably not because you probably need to go through a lot of different hoops to make that happen.
Yes, yeah, are living in those hoops, I think, for a lot of this project. But yeah, that is like I think it's purest form of what we do well, and then everything else is just trying to adapt parts of that to other styles of filmmaking. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I look forward to that, man. Thank you so much again, buddy, and lovely talking to you.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure.